Looking back, I always believed that having a solid plan was the key to avoiding chaos. It was my way of maintaining control, of keeping things predictable even when life threw unexpected turns my way. Growing up in a home where discipline and order were non-negotiable, I learned early on that certainty provided comfort. So, when I climbed the corporate ladder, that same mindset helped me stay ahead. But what happens when the very plan you built your life around shatters? When everything familiar turns foreign? That was the question weighing on my mind as I sat alone, nursing a drink, trying to piece together what came next. Having a solid plan is everything. It gives a sense of direction when things feel like they're unraveling. Sitting at the hotel bar, perched on a high stool, I ran through my options. The first was to step outside, flag down a cab, and head back to a place that barely felt like home anymore. My condo, filled with designer furniture, curated artwork, and an air of sophistication, still carried the unmistakable influence of someone else. Every detail screamed Candace Whitmore. The thought of returning to that space, where the past lingered in every shadow, made my stomach tighten. The second option was to go upstairs, where the unofficial after-party of Ajax Corporation's annual holiday gala was still raging. I had already made it through the main event. Firm handshakes, polite conversations, and all the social maneuvering expected of the company's youngest CEO. Most of the senior executives had left by now, along with their spouses, leaving behind the younger crowd eager to keep the night alive. Some of Ajax's clients had booked out private business suites for the evening, hosting gatherings that blurred the line between professional networking and outright debauchery. These after-parties had a reputation for going completely off the rails. Upper management pretended not to notice, though everyone knew they were well aware of what went on behind closed doors. They just made sure their own names stayed clear of any fallout. None of it interested me tonight. That left my third option, staying right where I was, nursing my glass of Dickel, and letting the night stretch on until someone eventually decided I'd had enough. Sooner or later, a concerned staff member would probably step in, send a porter to escort me to my room, and ensure I wasn't left passed out in a public space. Hotels had an image to maintain, after all. The thought made me chuckle under my breath. A familiar voice snapped me out of my thoughts, calling me by a name only one person ever used. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. David Nasser, my closest friend and colleague for the past 4 years, stood nearby. His dark brown eyes, nearly black in the dim lighting, always reminded me of a shark's, calculated and unreadable. It fit, considering his role in sales. I had once joked that his eyes probably rolled back like a predator's when he was closing a deal. He'd laughed and told me it only happened when the contract was signed. I believed him, with olive skin, sharp features, and an effortless confidence that made him impossible to ignore. Dave had the kind of looks that drew attention. The women at Ajax certainly noticed. He was just a little taller than me, something he never let me forget, and had a lean, polished elegance to him. His black, wavy hair was always styled to perfection, his face clean-shaven, and his wardrobe straight out of a European fashion magazine. But I knew him beyond the carefully curated image. Beneath all of it, Dave was exactly what he had always been, an incorrigible flirt and an unrepentant womanizer. He grinned, the same easy smile he wore in almost every situation, whether he was closing a deal or making a joke at my expense. I didn't think I had ever met anyone who smiled as much as he did. Even when he was being a jerk. He made some comment about my choice of activity for the night, pointing out that sitting at a bar drinking whiskey wasn't exactly a productive way to move forward, as if I didn't already know that. I could tell he was thinking about last week, when I had canceled my own 30th birthday party. That had been enough of a statement. No one had asked, but they all knew the reason. The truth was, it wasn't just about Candace. It wasn't just about what she did or how everything fell apart. It was about being stuck in place, unable to figure out the next step. Dave didn't hold back. He reminded me in that blunt way of his that the bridge was already burned. Candace would probably take me back in an instant, but the real question was whether I would ever want that. Trying to rebuild something that had already collapsed wasn't just difficult, it was impossible. I didn't argue because we both knew the answer. Betrayal changes everything. Love has a way of making you see things through rose-colored lenses, but once those lenses are shattered, you can't unsee the truth. And the truth was, the cracks had always been there. I just hadn't wanted to admit it. Reality has a way of making things painfully clear. The flaws I once ignored became glaringly obvious. things I had justified or overlooked now impossible to deny. I had put Candace on a pedestal, as most people do at the start of a relationship, believing in the illusion that she could stay there. But the harshest lesson in love isn't just watching someone fall from that height. It's when they pick up the pedestal and smash you with it, leaving nothing but a shattered heart and bleeding memories. A sharp laugh pulled me out of my spiraling thoughts. Dave, ever the grounding force in my life, had been talking, making some offhanded comment about how Candace's family wouldn't exactly be thrilled if we got back together. There was no denying that. If anyone had burned that bridge, it was him. There was no regret in his voice, though. If anything, he found the whole thing amusing. He had never been one to shy away from confrontation, and the fallout from my breakup with Candace had been no exception. He had stood by me, taken my side, and in doing so, had ensured he wouldn't be on the Whitmore's Christmas card list either. Not that he cared. He shifted gears, nudging me toward joining the party upstairs, where the unofficial post-gala chaos was unfolding. He reminded me that missing my own birthday party was one thing, but missing the annual spectacle of Melanie from accounting making a show of herself was another matter entirely. We both laughed at that. It had become something of a holiday tradition, one of those things people pretended to be shocked by, but secretly expected. Then, as if trying to sweeten the deal, he threw in another possibility, that Sarah might be convinced to give me a lap dance in honor of my birthday. It was such a ridiculous thought that I couldn't help but snort in amusement. That was something that only existed in Dave's delusions. Dave, as usual, didn't bother hiding his amusement. He had been openly obsessed with Sarah for ages, but had never acted on it. I called him out on it, questioning why he didn't just ask her out instead of constantly fantasizing. He didn't even hesitate before admitting that it wasn't rejection that scared him, it was the possibility that she might actually say yes. That caught me off guard. He laughed at my confusion, explaining that Sarah had a kind of energy that could devour a man whole. If she agreed to a date, it wouldn't be dinner and a movie. It would be something completely unpredictable, possibly dangerous. He even joked that she would likely sacrifice me to some ancient dark deity. He was only half kidding. We laughed about it. But the reality was that Dave had a point. Some women had an aura of chaos, and Sarah was definitely one of them. He stood up, leaving the choice in my hands. If I wanted to stay at the bar, lost in my thoughts and my drink, that was my decision. But if I wanted to step back into the world, upstairs was waiting. And he promised it would be a night I wouldn't forget. He made one last remark, teasing me about having another drink before making up my mind. Then, in true Dave fashion, he left me with a final, absurd joke. Something about how seeing a four-chested version of Melanie might leave permanent emotional scars. With a parting grin, he strolled away, his laughter trailing behind him. I found myself laughing too. He could be a lot to handle, but he was the kind of friend who made the darkest days a little easier to survive. If not for his sharp humor and relentless loyalty, I wasn't sure how I would have made it through the last few months. Those months had been some of the hardest of my life. 3.5 months, to be exact. It felt like a lifetime ago when I first met Candace. I had been at Ajax for about a year then, and she had just passed the bar exam, starting her career at a local law firm. She was impossible not to notice, 6'2", strikingly beautiful, with long golden hair and a lean, athletic build. She had played college volleyball before going to law school, and it showed in the way she carried herself. But it wasn't just her looks that captivated me. It was the way she could command a room, effortlessly drawing people in. She was charming, but aggressive, witty, but determined. She was intelligent, insatiable, and completely magnetic. Behind closed doors, our relationship was just as intense. Every moment with her felt like an adrenaline rush, both emotionally and physically. There were times when it felt like surviving one of our nights together was as exhausting as finishing a CrossFit workout. I never complained. Sore? Sure. Bruised? Occasionally. But I never once complained. We had been together for a couple of years before I proposed. I probably would have done it sooner, but to be honest, her family intimidated the hell out of me. People like to pretend that when you marry someone, you're only marrying them. That's a lie. You're also marrying their family. And Candace's family was intense. They were close-knit, the kind of family where everything was intertwined. Every decision weighed against collective expectations. The biggest issue, though, was that nearly all of them were lawyers. Her father, her older brother, and her sister-in-law. They were all deeply entrenched in the legal world. The Whitmores weren't just another well-off family in South Florida. They were a powerhouse. Her father, Conrad, had an air of superiority that was impossible to ignore. Maybe it was the natural arrogance of a high-profile defense attorney. Or maybe it was just the classic overprotective father act. Either way, he never made it easy for me. No father ever thinks anyone is good enough for his daughter, but with Conrad I could feel the unspoken judgment in every interaction. Her mother, Rachel, was the exception. She was warm, welcoming, and the only one who had ever made me feel like part of the family. Unlike the others, she wasn't a lawyer, which probably explained why she was the one who held everything together. She had the same height and striking features as Candace, though she carried herself with a quiet grace rather than a commanding presence. Then there was Brad, Candace's older brother. If Conrad's arrogance was refined, Brad's was outright unbearable. He was the worst kind of entitled, condescending, smug, and entirely too comfortable coasting through life on the success of his family name. He worked at his father's firm, and it was painfully obvious that he wouldn't have lasted a day anywhere else. And finally, there was Meredith, Brad's wife, a real estate attorney, and the last piece of the Whitmore puzzle. Describing her was easy. Imagine an Amazonian warrior towering at 7 feet tall, with a domineering presence and impossible proportions. Now shrink that image down to a fiery, 5-foot force of nature with a personality sharp enough to cut through steel, and you had Meredith Whitmore. She was ruthless, calculating, and terrifyingly efficient. Together, they formed an intimidating, unshakable unit, and for a while I thought I had found my place within it. I had been wrong. I never thought my life would turn out this way. Candace fit right in with my chaotic family, and I couldn't picture a future without her. So I proposed. She said yes. That summer felt like a dream. Engaged in May, moved into our condo by July, and I even landed a promotion. Everything was perfect, or so I thought. By September, things started falling apart. My new job demanded longer hours, and while I never intended for it to take over my life, it did. The strain between us grew, our plans unraveling one late night at a time. Labor Day weekend was the breaking point. Her family had a big Sunday gathering, something Conrad had been planning for a while. But a work disaster hit just before the holiday. I missed a critical error in a project, and fixing it meant working through the weekend. Changing my flight wasn't an option, so I told Candace she'd have to go without me. She was furious. Our worst argument yet happened the night she left. I reminded her of the countless times her job had kept us from important moments. But it didn't matter. She boarded the plane without me. The next day, I resolved the crisis at work and, miraculously, still had time to make it to the party. I booked the earliest flight to Florida, arriving just after sunrise. Fate, however, had other plans. My luggage didn't make it, forcing me to wait 2 extra hours. If not for that delay, everything might have been different. By the time I reached Coconut Grove, Candace's family greeted me with mixed reactions. Rachel's warm hug, Conrad's firm handshake, and Brad's usual smirk. They'd sent Candace and Meredith to the beach to cool off. Rachel suggested I go get them. I figured this was my chance to make things right. Walking down the secluded shore, I searched for them. When I didn't spot them right away, I assumed they were behind one of the dunes, probably sunbathing. Grinning, I imagined the teasing I'd endure if I caught them in a compromising position. Then I heard something, soft whispers, moans. My stomach dropped. My heart pounded as I crept closer. A part of me hoped I was wrong, but another part prepared for the worst. If she was with some guy, I'd confront them. If it was more than one, I'd just walk away. I started recording on my phone, needing proof. But nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. Candace wasn't with a man. She was with Meredith, and from the sound of it, she was doing a damn good job. Meredith gasped Candace's name, her voice thick with pleasure. My fiancé giggled, trailing kisses along her sister-in-law's skin. I stood frozen, my heart shattering. They didn't even notice me. I don't know how I managed to walk away, but I did. The life I had planned, the future I had built in my head, was over. I barely remember the drive back, but before I knew it, I was standing in front of Candace's mother. Concern filled her face as she asked about the girls, but I could barely form an answer. They were still on the beach. They'd be back soon. The emotion hit me hard, and before I could break down, I told her I had to leave. Conrad spoke up, reminding me to be back in time for the party, but I knew I couldn't stay. He looked confused as I told him it would be a mistake. They needed family there that night, and I wasn't going to be a part of it. I asked him to let Candace know I'd talk to her later, then walked out before either of them could press for more answers. An hour into the drive to Orlando, my phone started vibrating. I already knew I couldn't get a flight from there, so I rerouted to Tampa. A few extra hours of waiting was nothing compared to the need to get away. By the third ring, I finally answered. Candace's voice was soft, asking where I was and why I'd left. She reminded me that her father wanted the whole family together, but after what I had seen, that wasn't an option. She hesitated, insisting I had misunderstood, trying to frame it as a misinterpretation, but there was no mistake. I'd seen my fiancée with her sister-in-law, and there was no excuse that could rewrite what happened. Her immediate response was denial, like a lawyer sticking to a defense even when the evidence was overwhelming. She pleaded with me to talk before making any decisions, but the damage was done. Sarcastically, I threw her own words back at her, asking if she had managed to get all of Meredith's red hair out of her teeth. Her voice cracked, but I wasn't interested in hearing any more lies. Before she could launch another desperate attempt at justification, I ended the call and shut off my phone. By the time I reached Tampa and turned it back on, I had 19 missed calls. Most were from Candace, with a few from Meredith, one from Rachel, and 3 from Conrad. As I stared at the screen, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was Candace's father. His voice was sharp, demanding to know what had happened. Candace had locked herself in her old room, sobbing like a teenager, and he wanted answers. I simply told him the wedding was off. He was furious, demanding an explanation, but I told him his daughter needed to be the one to tell him. After a brief silence, his tone changed. No longer just a father, he slipped into lawyer mode, urging me to reconsider and talk things through. But there was nothing left to discuss. His daughter had already made a choice, and I wasn't going to be the one paying for it. I had a flight to catch, and I wasn't staying a second longer than necessary. He kept pressing, but I knew he wouldn't believe me without proof. I told him I'd deal with Candace when she got back and wished him luck with the rest of the night. While waiting for my flight, I checked my voicemails. Candace had cycled through every approach, questions, anger, bargaining, and finally just crying. It didn't change a thing. When I got home, the urge to drink myself into oblivion hit hard. Knowing I shouldn't do it alone, I called Dave. He picked me up, listened as I unloaded everything, and stayed with me while I drowned the night in alcohol. I must have told him the story at least 3 times, each time growing more sentimental. At some point, I even showed him the video. More than once. The next afternoon, I woke up to a brutal hangover and an even worse reality. I had to start figuring out life without Candace. The only problem was, I couldn't picture it. The next 3 months spiraled into a slow descent into depression, interrupted only by constant calls and visits from the Whitmore family. Candace was the first to show up. She returned Monday night to an empty condo, completely unprepared for what she walked into. Since I had temporarily moved in with Dave, her frantic call when she realized I was gone made it clear she hadn't expected me to actually leave. Eventually, I agreed to meet her the next evening. I arrived at the condo to find Candace had gone all out. Dinner, wine, candles, and a dress that left no doubt she looked stunning. But none of it mattered. The moment I walked in, I shut down her attempts to seduce her way out of what she had done. She insisted it was a mistake, that we loved each other and could fix this. I asked if she was still claiming it was just one time. When she hesitated, I knew the truth. I told her I had proof. A video. The color drained from her face before she collapsed into a chair, defeated. Tears streamed down her face as she begged me not to end things. But I had already made up my mind. 4 months into our engagement, and she had already betrayed me. Not just with anyone, but with her sister-in-law. The absurdity of it all hit me, as I mentioned how ironic it was that Meredith had helped us secure the condo, only to be the reason our relationship had ended. Candace barely whispered an apology, calling it a mistake, but to me, a mistake was a single moment of bad judgment, not something that unfolded the way it had. She didn't plan it, but she sure as hell didn't stop it either. And I didn't believe for a second that it was the first time. She sat there sobbing, unable to meet my eyes as I told her to decide what to do with the condo. Then I turned to leave. She pleaded with me not to walk away, claiming she still loved me. I looked at her one last time, my own emotions threatening to surface, and forced myself to say what I needed to. If that's your definition of love, Candace, I don't want it. I shut the door behind me as she called my name. Stepping into a future without her felt surreal. I had always imagined growing old with her, navigating life's ups and downs together. Now that future was gone. Days later, I moved back into the condo. Candace had already left. She left me a note saying she was going home, but I had no idea what her next move would be. I didn't have to wait long to find out. A few days later, I got a call that made it clear she had been busy rewriting the story. Conrad Whitmore's voice roared through the phone, demanding to know why I was threatening to release a video. He ranted about protecting his family's reputation and throwing legal threats my way before I could even get a word in. When he finally paused for breath, I took my chance to clarify. I had never threatened to release anything. I had no intention of humiliating Candace, Meredith, or the Whitmores. He scoffed, asking why Meredith would have anything to be humiliated about. His lawyer instincts were in full swing. I asked what Candace and Meredith had told him I had seen. According to them, I had overheard Candace talking about an ex-boyfriend. She supposedly confessed to sleeping with him 6 months ago, after she and I had met, but before we were engaged. The claim was that I misunderstood and overreacted. It was an impressive lie, but still a lie. I sighed, knowing that once I said the truth, there would be no turning back, but Candace had left me no choice. "That's not what happened, Mr. Whitmore," I said. "What I saw on the beach was my ex-fiancé pleasuring her sister-in-law." Silence. Then an explosion. He raged, calling me a liar, threatening lawsuits, vowing to destroy me if I spread such slander. I'd expected disbelief, but I'd hoped he'd at least talk to Candace and Meredith before going on the attack. Clearly, I was wrong. Days later, the attacks began. I was called into Ajax Corp's legal department. They had been contacted about a potential libel lawsuit against me, with questions suggesting that I had been discussing the situation with coworkers, especially Dave. I gave them a vague professional response, explaining that the breakup involved a complicated situation, and that certain people were trying to cover their tracks. They advised me to get a lawyer. When I did, I learned that 2 lawsuits had already been filed against me. The first was a preemptive attempt to ban any photos or videos involving the Whitmore family. The second questioned the financial structure of our condo arrangement, trying to put my stake in it in jeopardy. My lawyer asked if I actually had the video. I handed it to him. He asked if there were copies. I told him there weren't. He sighed and told me the case would never make it to trial. The Whitmores didn't want the truth to come out. If they pushed, I had the one piece of evidence that would prove them wrong. And they knew it. My lawyer didn't sugarcoat anything. Though the case would never reach trial, the Whitmores could still drag it out, draining my time and money. They might push to renegotiate the condo's financial terms, making things costly for me. Worse, they could keep harassing Ajax, tarnishing my standing at work. Whether or not it was fair, they had the resources to make my life miserable. I was stunned. I could win every battle, but I'd have to fight each one. The cost, both financially and mentally, would be steep. That night, I vented to Dave, frustrated and exhausted. He listened, uncharacteristically quiet, offering no jokes or sarcasm. For a week, I stewed in my legal troubles. Then, out of nowhere, my lawyer called. Everything had been dropped. No lawsuits, no more threats. It was over. Relieved, I went out with Dave to celebrate. With the legal mess behind me, I could focus on work and start erasing Candace from my mind. Her actions over the past month had helped, but I still hadn't shaken my feelings for her. Then, a week later, those feelings resurfaced. Rachel reached out unexpectedly, requesting to meet. Of all the Whitmores, she was the only one I had any respect left for. Out of courtesy, I agreed. She was flying in and out the same day, so I took a half day from work and picked her up. We grabbed a quick lunch before heading to my condo to talk. The mood shifted the moment we stepped inside. Gone was the polite small talk. Something heavier loomed. With a glass of wine in hand, Rachel sighed and broke the tension. She was the first Whitmore to acknowledge the mess they had put me through. While she couldn't officially speak for the family, she apologized for the legal threats. I thanked her, but it was disappointing that the rest of them didn't feel the same. Then she explained what had happened after I left that day. When Candace and Meredith returned from the beach, they had no idea I had been there. But when Candace got my call, everything unraveled. Candace spiraled into an emotional wreck, while Meredith exploded in anger. Meanwhile, Conrad had secretly planned to announce his entry into politics that night, until the chaos forced him to postpone. I expressed my sympathies, saying I knew what it was like to have plans fall apart. Rachel gave me a knowing look and nodded. I still didn't understand why they had come after me so aggressively. I hadn't done anything to them. Rachel admitted it was mostly Conrad's doing. He had always been fiercely protective of Candace. When she told him about the video, he saw it as a personal attack, assuming I was trying to ruin their family. But after his call to me, he shifted. The emotional father disappeared, replaced by the calculating lawyer. And then something else happened, something I wasn't aware of. Rachel hesitated, searching my face. I could see she expected me to react. Instead, I just stared at her, confused. "You don't know about the meeting?" she asked. I shook my head. "What meeting?" Her eyes locked onto mine, gauging my reaction. Then she asked a question I hadn't expected. "Brandon, do you still have that video?" I told her the truth. I had left a copy with my lawyer and deleted the original. No other copies existed. "So you didn't send someone to meet with Conrad and the rest of the family last week?" she pressed. I frowned, confused. "No, who are you talking about?" She smirked slightly. "I think his last name was Nash or Nashua." A sinking feeling hit me. "Nasser?" "Yeah, that sounds right. Candace didn't say anything, but she recognized him. So you really didn't send him?" My stomach twisted. "No," I groaned. "He's my best friend." Rachel stifled a laugh. "I told them that, but no one believed me. Well, except Brad." I raised an eyebrow. "Brad? That's surprising." "Don't be," she said dryly. "He just didn't think you were that smart." I chuckled despite myself. "Figures." Rachel leaned forward, amusement flickering in her eyes. "Whatever his goal was, your friend made an impression. Conrad even said he'd make a great lawyer, an ambulance chaser, but still a lawyer." I shook my head, picturing Dave walking into a room full of Whitmores, completely uninvited and stirring up chaos. "Apparently," she continued, "he showed them a copy of your video, and let's just say, it hit hard. For the first time, the Whitmores had to stop pointing fingers at me and take a long, hard look at themselves. Ever since then, things had been tense in their household." I sighed, rubbing my face. "I should have known Dave would keep a copy." Rachel waved it off. "I never saw it myself, but I've heard enough." She took a deep breath as if bracing herself. "Tell me the truth, Brandon," she said quietly. "Did you really catch Candace and Meredith together?" There was no point in lying. "I did. And that's what's on the video." I nodded. Rachel dropped her head, shoulders shaking. She was trying to hold back tears. Instinctively, I moved to her side, wrapping an arm around her. She leaned into me, pressing her hands against my chest as I held her. The weight of the truth was finally sinking in for her, too. For a brief moment, comforting Rachel felt like holding Candace again. Without thinking, I reassured her, my hand moving in slow, familiar circles across her back, a habit from when Candace struggled to sleep. Then, muffled laughter broke the moment. Rachel, despite her tears, wore a knowing smile. She mentioned Candace had been asking for the same back massages ever since I left, a small sign of just how much my absence weighed on her. Rachel admitted her daughter regretted everything, both what she had done to me and what she had lost. She knew I would have been a great husband and father, but perhaps it was better if she never fully grasped how much damage she had done. Then came an unexpected revelation. Candace was moving back to Florida for good and planned to sign over the condo to me. While I would have to take over the payments, it was her way of trying to make amends. But I wasn't convinced. She still refused to admit the truth. Rachel explained why. While the video suggested more than just a one-time mistake, there was enough doubt to prevent any real consequences. That doubt was the only thing keeping Brad from divorcing Meredith. If either of them admitted there was more to the story, their marriage would collapse. Candace had to consider whether telling the truth even mattered. Rachel then asked a question that cut through everything. If Candace admitted everything and was truly remorseful, would I take her back? The answer had been clear to me since the flight home. I couldn't. Rachel already knew. Candace knew too, though she refused to say it out loud. She still wanted to fight for us, but it no longer mattered. I had already given up. And if Candace was anything, it was persistent. After dropping Rachel off at the airport, I called Dave. The moment he answered, I unleashed my frustration. He had gone to Florida, met with the Whitmores, and shown them the video, all without telling me. To him, it was a strategic move. He never blackmailed them, just implied that multiple copies of the video existed and that eventually the truth would surface. By giving them time to prepare for the inevitable, he had positioned himself as their best shot at containing the fallout. In return, he asked for nothing, just that the lawsuits disappear. And they did. Frustrated, I accused him of stealing the video from my phone. He didn't deny it. He had kept a copy, just one for himself, claiming it was his compensation for the trouble. He assured me it wouldn't go anywhere unless I wanted it leaked in the future. I told him to keep it buried. Despite everything, I thanked him. I thought it was over. Then I went home for Thanksgiving. I was wrong. When I arrived at my parents' farm in Indiana, I immediately sensed something was off. I had been looking forward to spending time with my three older brothers and their families, but the tension with my parents was impossible to ignore. The reason became clear on Thanksgiving Day. Candace showed up for dinner, invited by my mother. They called it an early Christmas present. I wondered what kind of return policy it came with. I had never given my parents the full story of our breakup, only that Candace had cheated and the wedding was off. I had also let slip that we hadn't spoken since she returned after Labor Day, and worse, that I still loved her despite everything. They had meant well, thinking they were helping me, but their decision to bring her here felt like a complete betrayal of my trust. When Candace arrived, she greeted me, her eyes pleading for another chance. I turned away and continued my conversation with one of my brothers. Moments later, my parents confronted me, chastising me for being rude. I reminded them that this was their house. If they wanted me to leave, they only had to say so. They fell silent, and I stayed. Dinner was uncomfortable. I ignored Candace completely, shutting down every attempt she made to start a conversation. My parents seemed to realize they had miscalculated, but my oldest brother didn't. Mid-meal, he called me out for my behavior. I'd already had enough. Instead of biting my tongue, I pointed out that the real rudeness was inviting my ex-fiancée without any warning. If this was how things were done now, maybe we should invite all my exes to the next family gathering. Hell, maybe even my ex-wife. Silence followed. My brother lowered his head, his wife looked furious, and my other two brothers suddenly found their plates fascinating. Candace excused herself and left the table. My parents shot me reproachful looks, but I returned the stare without apology. This wasn't like Coconut Grove. I wasn't going to leave just to make things easier for someone else. This was my family. I sighed and followed Candace into the kitchen, finding her wiping away tears. Seeing her like that, I expected to feel regret, but I didn't. She admitted she had accepted the invitation because being here was still better than being with her own family. I asked whose fault that was, and she acknowledged that she and Meredith were now dealing with the fallout of their choices. She still only admitted to what could be proven, avoiding anything deeper, which was exactly why I couldn't trust her. When I pressed her, she finally confessed that she had cheated more than once. There had been others in college and law school, and one more after we started dating. She had never told me about her attraction to women, fearing I wouldn't accept it. If it had been in the past, like her ex-boyfriends, I wouldn't have cared. But the fact that she had helped her sister-in-law cheat on her brother? That was something else entirely. She broke down, acknowledging that Brad wasn't a good person, but even he didn't deserve what had happened. Their marriage was barely holding together, and she suspected that if he wasn't already cheating, he soon would be. The only question was whether they would tear each other apart or agree to an open marriage. Meanwhile, their family was in chaos. Conrad was trying to keep things from spiraling further, but Candace's relationship with Brad had turned toxic. She admitted that while she had never been close to him, he would now gladly destroy her if given the chance. For once, she didn't try to justify what she had done. She had betrayed him just as she had betrayed me. She wanted to make peace with him, but she knew it was unlikely. There was nothing left to say. The tension between Candace and me was thick, but neither of us knew how to start. Finally, she broke the silence, claiming she was trying to win me back. I shut that down immediately. There was no chance of that happening. She insisted that, given time, she could rebuild my trust. But I wasn't interested in empty promises. Trust was already gone. She had lied from the beginning, cheated on me 4 months into our engagement, and betrayed her own family. What foundation was there to rebuild? Frustration boiled over. The idea of constantly wondering if she was being unfaithful, of never trusting her around anyone, man, woman, or even family, was unbearable. I mocked her reasoning, calling out her selfishness. Every choice she made, including cheating, was because she hadn't gotten what she wanted. What would happen next time? Would it be the mailman, a random stranger? Candace sat there sobbing when my parents intervened, trying to stop me. But I wasn't done. I turned to them, demanding to know why they had betrayed my trust by inviting her here. My mother admitted Candace had convinced them. She just wanted to apologize and tell me how much she still loved me. They thought they were helping, but this had never been about me. It was about what Candace wanted. Another chance, my forgiveness, a carefully orchestrated ambush to manipulate me to giving her what she couldn't earn. Everyone had focused on her needs, not mine, and once again, she had twisted the truth to get her way. Before Candace could stop me, I told my parents the real reason I had ended the engagement. I had caught her having closeness with her sister-in-law. The silence was deafening. My mother gasped. My father's face paled. Candace bolted from the room, grabbing her coat and purse before slamming the door. I went to pack my things while my parents followed, their guilt clear. My brothers and their families remained at the table watching the fallout unfold. My mother, teary-eyed, asked if I'd come home for Christmas. I told her no. I needed space and I'd call when I was ready. So ended my disastrous Thanksgiving. Later, sitting at a bar, I nursed a drink, grateful for the escape. A woman behind the counter caught my attention, mid-40s, still attractive, though time had softened what was once undeniable beauty. Her name tag read Becca. We exchanged playful banter, her teasing me about staring at her chest, me feigning innocence. But when I joked about flirting, she shut it down with a laugh, mentioning her girlfriend wouldn't be thrilled. The reminder of Candace and Meredith made me wince, and she noticed immediately. Her expression shifted. Assuming I was uncomfortable with her identity, she became defensive, but I quickly corrected her. I had just lost my fiancé to another woman. Her face softened with understanding. People sometimes needed time to figure out who they were, she said. But that didn't make cheating excusable. She didn't care who Candace had been with. Cheaters were garbage, period. For the first time in days, I laughed. As she wiped down the counter, she asked what I did for a living. Marketing, I said. She smirked. Figures. Then she walked off to refill someone's drink. The conversation with Becca took an unexpected turn. She assured me I'd get through this, sharing that she'd been in a similar situation years ago. It had been difficult, but eventually she got tired of living in the mess her ex left behind. Time helped, and she moved on. She had no doubt I would too. I was young, successful, and had a sense of humor. I joked about not being cute enough for her, and she laughed, saying that if she had to pick, she'd rather take Dave home for the night. When I feigned offense, she explained with a smirk, Dave was safe, just looking for a quick thrill, while I was the type of guy a woman could fall for. That made me dangerous. She wasn't wrong. Dave lived for the chase. If he ended up in someone's bed, there were no expectations, no complications. He was gone before the sun came up. I, on the other hand, was different. I wouldn't change anything between her and her girlfriend, but emotions had a way of creeping in. She wasn't willing to risk that. I recognized the kindness in her rejection. She reassured me that someone out there would see me as a prize worth keeping, and when I found her, I'd know. Until then, I needed to live a little. There was a story in her words, but she didn't seem ready to share it, so I let it go. With that, she moved on to another customer. I paid my tab, left a generous tip, and stepped out of the hotel, ready for whatever the night had in store. The party could be heard before I even reached the elevator. The hallway buzzed with people gathered outside open doors, the music pounding like a heartbeat. I slipped into the crowd, trying to disappear for a while, until Dave's voice cut through the noise. "There he is! The birthday boy!" Groaning, I knew I'd have to make him pay for this later. For the next 15 minutes, I endured congratulations, handshakes, and more than a few kisses that made Dave's setup slightly more tolerable. Just as I thought I had escaped, the music stopped. "Sven!" Dave slurred, clearly already several drinks in. "Get over here!" Like a man walking to his execution, I approached, already planning my revenge. "Come sit down," he grinned. "We got you a couple of birthday gifts." The moment I sat, laughter erupted behind me. Then, like an avalanche, Melanie Schieffer appeared. 5'3", 230 pounds of pure energy, wrapped in big red curls and an even bigger personality. Her excitement bounced in sync with her infamous 40E chest, which had a reputation of its own. Before I could react, she lifted her cardigan. "Surprise!" she squealed, pressing her ridiculously soft, oversized assets into my face. Cheers and laughter exploded around us. Trapped in a smothering embrace, I tried to salvage my dignity. "Wow," I managed, voice muffled. "What, pleasant surprise, or rather, two," Melanie giggled, planting a loud kiss on my cheek before tucking herself back in. As she left, I shot Dave a murderous glare. He flinched, but recovered quickly, grinning as he nodded toward someone. The music shifted, slowing to a sultry, smoky beat. Then I saw her, Sarah Jones. My breath caught. The real show had just begun. Sarah, a striking force in sales alongside Dave, had a presence that commanded attention. Tall, nearly my height, she usually towered over me in her signature 4-inch boots. Her jet black hair cascaded like a cape down her lean frame, complementing her bold, gothic look. Blood-red lipstick, dark eye makeup, and those piercing brown eyes that could cut through anyone. As the music pulsed, she moved like a predator, her black blouse and striped skirt hugging her athletic body. A tattoo wrapped around her right arm, a tree with strange symbols beneath it, a man's face hidden in the branches. Rumors swirled that it symbolized a lover she had sacrificed beneath an oak tree on the summer solstice. Likely nonsense, but fitting for someone as enigmatic as she was. Dave always joked that her aggressive confidence and sultry demeanor made customers buy more than they planned. Watching her dance now, it was easy to see why. She was hypnotic, exuding raw power with every movement. When her eyes locked onto mine, it felt as if she were toying with me, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Without breaking eye contact, she unzipped her skirt, letting it slide to the floor, revealing long, sculpted legs wrapped in black strappy stilettos. With a swift kick, the skirt flew straight at Dave, who groaned as he caught it. She turned slowly, teasing the crowd with the sight of her barely there thong before slipping off her blouse. The black lace bra accentuated her curves, making it impossible to look away. Then the energy shifted. A second woman stepped into the circle. Debbie Smith, Sarah's longtime friend and complete opposite. Where Sarah was all sharp edges and intensity, Debbie radiated warmth and mischief. Her small frame and high girlish voice made her seem innocent, but anyone who knew her understood she had the spirit of a spring break wild child. Unlike Sarah's calculated seduction, Debbie's approach was playful. Stripping down to a lacy pink bra and a matching thong, she twirled and laughed, feeding off the crowd's energy. The contrast between them was striking. Sarah was temptation, dangerous, and deliberate, while Debbie was pure fun, carefree, and inviting. As they danced, their chemistry became undeniable. Sarah moved like a snake charmed by music, her eyes flicking to Debbie with a wicked smile. Debbie responded with teasing winks and playful kisses thrown her way. Then, with a mischievous grin, Debbie snuck up behind Sarah and unclasped her bra. Sarah spun just in time, catching it before it fell, denying the crowd the view they had been hoping for. A chorus of disappointment followed, but Sarah, never one to be outdone, let the moment build before smirking and dropping the satin black bra herself. The crowd erupted. The two women circled each other like duelists, their movements precise and electric. Then, in a sharp, unexpected motion, Sarah lunged forward. Before I could see what happened next, Debbie stepped directly in front of me, blocking my view with a knowing sparkle in her eye. She held my attention effortlessly until the crowd roared and she suddenly stepped aside. Sarah stood bent at the waist, slowly peeling the tiny thong down her toned legs, her cold stare fixed on Debbie. The message was clear. Sarah hated losing, but then a sly smile spread across her lips, a sign that she wasn't done yet. Before she could make her next move, a deep voice cut through the excitement like a blade. Harold Bingham, our VP of Engineering, had decided the show had gone far enough. His booming command for the performance to end startled everyone, even Sarah. Debbie, caught off guard, stumbled, falling straight into my lap. Instinctively, I reached to steady her, my hands landing directly on her. Heat radiated through the thin lace as she settled against me. The crowd's laughter and disappointment filled the air as Bingham joked about the limits of our party's entertainment. Then, he called me out. All eyes turned toward me as he pointed out where my hands had ended up, right on Debbie's chest. The room erupted in cheers and whistles. It was only then that I realized what I was holding. Debbie's soft, warm curves pressed into my palms. Damn. I quickly let go, but the damage was done. She stood, laughing, and retrieved her clothes while I did my best to avoid eye contact, hoping no one noticed the very real problem I was now dealing with. Luck wasn't on my side. A quiet voice purred from behind me, teasing about my apparent excitement. Turning, I met Debbie's icy blue eyes, her smirk barely concealing the laughter threatening to spill over. Her smile was radiant, lighting up the room as she leaned in, pressing her fully clothed body against mine. She suggested we go to my room, something about cleaning up properly. I sighed, remembering my hard rule about never getting involved with married women. After Candace, that rule was absolute. But then, Debbie made things more complicated. She confessed that her marriage was on the rocks, recently discovering her husband's infidelity. She wasn't sure if she would leave him, stay until she found a better option, or try to salvage what was left. But one thing was certain, her rules had changed. Her gaze locked onto mine, waiting for my decision. I grinned, playing along, and she lit up with excitement. Grabbing a small bag, she looped her arm around mine, practically dragging me toward the elevator. Inside my room, she wasted no time. Tossing her bag onto the table, she led me to a chair and ordered me to undress. I didn't hesitate. Once I was down to my shorts, she took my pants, carefully placing them in a dry cleaning bag and hanging them outside the door. When she turned back, a playful smile danced across her lips. Then, she pulled something from her bag, a cupcake with a single candle wedged between her cleavage. She giggled, wishing me a happy birthday. Grinning, I leaned in, blew out the candle, and, without using my hands, took a bite. Debbie laughed, tossing the rest of the cupcake aside before I pulled her close, our lips meeting in a slow, deep kiss. Guiding her toward the bed, I laid her down gently, looking into her eyes as anticipation crackled between us. It was time to unwrap my gift. Lying together, our bodies still entangled, I listened to the rhythm of our breathing slow, the warmth of Debbie's skin against mine, the scent of her hair, the way she fit perfectly against me. It was all too easy to get lost in the moment. As she sighed contentedly, I pulled her closer, trailing my fingers down the curve of her spine, squeezing her gently before we both drifted into sleep. At some point, I stirred, sensing movement beside me. When I opened my eyes, I found Debbie's deep blue gaze locked onto mine, a playful, satisfied glint in them. She smiled, teasingly asking if I'd enjoyed my birthday present. I chuckled, rolling my eyes. Best gift ever. She kissed me softly, an unspoken goodbye. The warmth of her body disappeared as she slid off the bed. Sitting at the edge for a moment, she let out a quiet laugh, shaking her head at the reality of what we'd done. Then, gathering her things, she disappeared into the bathroom. When she re-emerged, she was slightly disheveled but still effortlessly beautiful. I asked her to stay, but she only smiled, shaking her head. Not this time. Before stepping out, she turned back one last time, her voice light and sweet as she thanked me. And just like that, she was gone. I lay there for a while, staring at the ceiling, letting sleep pull me back under. I wondered if Debbie truly understood how much her gift had meant. At dawn, my phone buzzed obnoxiously, dragging me awake. Groaning, I grabbed it. Dave. His voice was far too chipper for this early in the morning. He had something to share, something that he claimed would turn my bad dream into a good one. I agreed to meet him for breakfast, but before I could hang up, a sultry female voice interrupted in the background. Then came the unmistakable sound of a sharp slap, followed by Dave's groan of appreciation. Sarah. I barely processed what was happening before she took the phone, purring into the receiver. She made it clear she wasn't happy that Debbie had gotten to me first, and demanded I get my A to their room. My sleep-fogged brain short-circuited. After a few incoherent mutters, I did the only thing I could. I hung up and turned off my phone. There were plenty of reasons I wasn't going to Dave's hotel room. For one, I had barely climbed out of the darkness Candace had left me in. I wasn't ready for whatever chaos awaited in there. I also had no interest in stepping into Dave's world, where boundaries were optional. And, as tempting as Sarah was, the thought of seeing Dave without clothes while being disciplined was enough to send me straight to therapy. I laughed to myself. I was young, successful, and decent-looking. Not a bad deal. And one day, I'd prove it to the right woman. Until then, I could wait. For the first time in a long time, I was finally ready to move on. Rachel's presence in my hotel room felt like an echo of the past I had spent months trying to leave behind. She carried the weight of her family's unraveling, but unlike the rest of them, she never hid behind arrogance or legal maneuvering. She was the only Whitmore I had ever genuinely liked, and that made her visit harder to ignore. She sat on the edge of the chair, her fingers tightening around her purse, as if holding on to something tangible would keep her steady. I watched as she took a slow breath, her carefully composed exterior showing the first signs of wear. There was something strangely satisfying about seeing the cracks in their perfect world. Not because I wanted her to suffer, she didn't deserve that, but because it was proof that none of them were untouchable. I didn't need to ask why she was here. The answer was obvious. Candace. She started talking about her daughter, the way she had spiraled since everything had come to light, how she barely left her house, how even Brad, in his usual smugness, had lost interest in tormenting her. It was strange to hear that after everything, Candace wasn't trying to rebuild or move forward. She was simply stuck. I'd expected anger, manipulation, another attempt at rewriting the past to make herself the victim, but it seemed the weight of her choices had finally caught up to her. Rachel wasn't asking me to forgive Candace or to take her back. That much was clear. Instead, she was here to make peace. To tell me that despite everything, Candace had loved me in her own flawed way. That her regret was real, even if it came too late. I wasn't sure what she expected me to do with that information. Maybe nothing. Maybe she just needed to say it aloud, to try and ease her own guilt over how things had fallen apart. When she finally stood to leave, I felt an unexpected pang of sympathy, not for Candace, but for Rachel. She had spent her whole life keeping the Whitmore family together, smoothing over the messes her husband, son, and now daughter had made. And yet, this was one problem she couldn't fix. After she left, I stared at the empty glass on my nightstand, the last remnants of last night's whiskey catching the morning light. It would be easy to pour another, to lose a few more hours in the comfort of numbness. Instead, I grabbed my jacket and walked out. The hotel lobby buzzed with life. Businessmen checking out, tourists gathering luggage, staff moving with quiet efficiency. I stepped outside, letting the crisp morning air cut through the fog in my head. The city stretched out before me, full of possibility, full of people who had no idea who I was or what I had been through. I had spent too long letting the past define me. It was time to stop. With no real destination in mind, I started walking. Maybe I'd call Dave. Maybe I'd let Sarah scold me for skipping out on her game. Maybe I'd even let myself enjoy the ridiculousness of my life for once. But one thing was certain. I wasn't looking back anymore.